Thank you very much. And to all the distinguished guests and fellow panelists, blessings be upon all of us. I come to you in the capacity as a member, like Dr. Peckney, of the advisory board for the Entrepreneurship Institute at King Fayed University of Petroleum and Minerals. But I want to devote my time today to talking about how we might build on some of the ideas that we've heard and utilize my background as a historian, as a consultant to companies, and as a head of the entrepreneurship program at my university. And to do so, I want to begin with a thought which is, I think, important for how we frame policy in a knowledge economy. And it is important to remember that there are two kinds of innovation. There's incremental or small changes that are done in response to market demand or to solve manufacturing problems. Those are often innovations or changes that are made by small or medium enterprises. But there are also disruptive innovations, major technologies that alter the status quo of economies and societies, change the way we live our daily lives. Indeed, the iPhone is probably the great example of a disruptive change. Now, I put incremental ahead of disruptive because all too often we tend to think about the disruptive technologies and not necessarily the incremental innovations. But frankly, for a successful economy, whether it be the United States or in the 19th century, which is what I study, or the kingdom today, a successful economy has a mix of incremental and disruptive innovations. The question is, how do we want to picture? How do we want to think about those innovations? How do they fit together? And as you know, you can easily talk about it in terms of 4 industrial revolutions. I'm not going to go over this whole slide. In fact, I have a number of slides that I will jump over. Apologize in advance that I'll go over those, but I am determined to make sure that I live up to the expectation. I'm going to finish this talk in 7 minutes. So the 4 industrial revolutions, of course, are about factories in the 19th century, big business at the start of the 20th century, information in the mid-20th century, and the integration of physical, digital, and biological technologies that we see coming right now, of course, built around AI. A second way of picturing it, similar to the 4 industrial revolutions, but a picture that I find much more helpful is to talk about Kondryev's cycles. Kondryev was a famous Soviet economist in the 1920s, and he came up with this notion that technology changes over time in a series of cycles. Why do I like cycles? Cycles remind us that a revolution or a set of big technological changes has a birth, a growth, and a decline. And in particular, it reminds us that we need to ask questions about what happens in each of those phases, and in particular, what brings about a change from one cycle to another. How do we go from one of those valleys that you see in that diagram upward on a slope to create a new cycle? And that indeed we are, as a world economy, facing the question of where is the next cycle going to come from. I'm going to skip this slide, but obviously entrepreneurs play an important role in creating and starting those cycles. I apologize, I missed a slide there. So there really are always 2 questions that we ask about the 4th Industrial Revolution, or that we ask indeed about where do Kondryev cycles come from. We get very excited and spend a great deal of time debating what technology is going to bring that about, what mix of technologies. And of course, something like artificial intelligence, as our first speaker said, is key to that key to whatever the new cycle of or revolution that's coming about. But for me, an even more important question is, how will entrepreneurs create the next cycle? What is the social and human processes that allow a society such as the kingdom to go up and contribute to creating a new cycle, to stimulating and shaping a breakthrough technology into a successful portion of the economy? In history, my field suggests a multi-step process. This process here there's lots of words on this slide, but notice the red words. Those are the key things. There's always a big breakthrough. Steve Jobs introduces the personal computer. Nikola Tesla in the 1880s introduces the first alternating current motor. What happens after that big breakthrough? Well, more often than not, there's a loose network of entrepreneurs and practitioners who come together, who share informal, non-codified knowledge. They are much more interested in the know-how than the know-why. And those entrepreneurs then raise capital, and this capital is used to negotiate with customers and ultimately to build organizations and networks that drive down the costs and make technology available to mass audiences. And of course, to sustain that market position, ultimately, organizations such as universities take on the role of codifying and creating that knowledge and passing it on to the next generation. Now, you might sort of say there's a lot of words on that slide, and indeed you might say, could you give us an example, Professor Carlson? That would certainly be the next question that would be out of the mouth of my students, whether I'm visiting and lecturing at KFUPM or my home university. And I could go through an entire example, take you through those 6 steps, but I just simply want to point out that the cycle always begins with that loose network of entrepreneurs, of practitioners. And indeed, one example I'm just beginning to study is the early automobile industry in the United States. What happened circa 1900, 1905 in Detroit? Well, we often talk about the man in that car, Henry Ford, but we really should be thinking about all the people in the background there, that the automobile industry was shaped into a major industry, a major technology, because there were dozens, if not hundreds, of practitioners who were all experimenting, starting up businesses, trying to launch their own brand of automobiles. And of course, they go through a process where they have to raise the capital, they have to negotiate with customers. Many of them fail, many of them struggle to come up with the right sort of money. And ultimately, they do create a mature industry, which is reflected by large factories, as you see in these pictures, and remarkable production systems such as the mass assembly line. So what are my takeaway messages for you? Several. One is I want to remind us that the formation of a Kondratiev cycle, the way a disruptive technology becomes something that is the next big wave, is done by a remarkable mix, and this is the word, remarkable mix of small entrepreneurs and large firms. And that indeed, as we frame policy, we're trying to come up with ways that stimulate that creation of dense networks of creative practitioners and create situations and opportunities where they, through intellectual property, can own their ideas, but at the same time can share those ideas, to share that know-how. And that wherever I look across the any innovation ecosystem, I see examples of this network of informal exchanges. You see it whether you're looking in a successful laboratory like Dr. Peckney works in, or you see it in the Entrepreneurship Institute at KFUPM, where students come together, work with faculty, and are able to have that exchange of ideas, or you see it across an entire innovation district, as was the case in Silicon Valley in the United States. That's the secret of Silicon Valley, this ability to create and interact with different individuals. So let me leave you with those takeaway messages. I know we're coming up to a break, and I also want to make sure that we have time for lots of questions. So thank you for your attention.